WFJA 105.5, Sanford, Pinehurst, Southern Pines.
It's now time for the Recovery Boys, Lewis Finch and Macon Moy, as they spend the next hour with you discussing the issues of alcoholism and drug addiction, as well as the road to recovery. Here's Lewis and Macon.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight on the Recovery Boys. I'm Macon.
I'm Lewis.
And we are the Recovery Boys. Tonight, one of the things we would like to do before we bring Kayla on and then a little bit further into the show, we'll introduce our guest, is to make sure and let everybody know if you have any information that you want about our show, if you want to send us a message, if you want to listen to the show, if you're not in the listening area, go to our website, therecoveryboys.com. There's a listen live link on it. There's a contact section tab that you can go to if you want to send us a question. And, you know, Lewis, we were talking at dinner. One of the things that we'd like to start seeing is if you have a question, you know, the great thing about the internet and about sending us a email is that, you know, you don't have to worry about anybody recognizing your voice. You can ask us what you want, and we'll do the research and come back and give you well-researched, as articulated as we can get it, response. And so, but if you are listening to us tonight and you want to call us, you can reach us at 866-465-3110. And if I want my beautiful wife to speak to me on the way home, I do want to remind everybody that if you'll look on our website, there are a list of recovery options, treatment resources that are on our website. All you have to do is go and look for it. And there are resources on our website for people with low money or no money.
Yes.
Lewis, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing excellent. I'll take that back. I'm a good alcoholic and addict. I'm lying. I am actually recovering from, I'm not really sure what I'm recovering from. I know from the neck up, I'm a mess. And so if I start coughing and leave the room, you'll know why I've left. But I think I'm coming to the latter stages of this. I hope I am anyway, because I can't keep this up much longer.
Yeah. Well, if you need to get up, you know, you're welcome to,
well,
just as long as you come back.
I will definitely be back.
Yeah. And, you know, it's been we weren't on last week. Carolina had a basketball game, so we missed our show last week. But I think we're pretty good for the rest of the year. We have a lot of guests. We have one of the things we would like is some listener, viewer input on what you would like for us to talk about. If there's a topic or something that we can research for you or share with you, or find somebody who's been affected by whatever it is that you're interested in finding out about, we will bring them on as guests. And so we'd like to ask for people to go to our website. And we will, one of the things that I will commit to everybody is that we will have our Facebook pages. Our social media platform is going to be something we pay a lot of attention to, so you'll start seeing more social media posting, different posts coming from, you know, from the show, from the future shows, topics, those types of things, because we really would like to build that audience as well as the audience we have listening here. So tonight we'll start like we do every week with Kayla. She's in early recovery. One of the things that, and I say this every week, one of the things we want to do is make sure that we cover all aspects of the disease of addiction and alcoholism and recovery. And people in early recovery make us happy. We love seeing people be successful in, you know, trying to beat the disease, trying to claim their life back. Kayla is one of those people for us. So, Kayla, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing great, thanks. Lewis?
Yeah, Kayla, glad to talk to you again.
You too.
So I talked to Kayla earlier, and I told her, I said, you know, we're just about run out of things to ask you, even though there's so many different things that will come up from time to time. But we did ask her maybe just to be prepared to present something for all those people that listen to us in early recovery, things that make a difference for her. And so we kind of give her this little segment will become hers. So, Kayla, what have you got for us tonight?
I wanted to talk a little about the first step and it actually comes from our daily meditation. Our first step says that we admitted that we were powerless over drugs or alcohol, and that our lives had become unmanageable. And in the meditation for today, it says the action we take in the first step will be evident in the way we live, even from our first day clean. If we truly believe that we are powerless over our addictions, we will not choose to be around drugs. To continue to live with or associate with practicing addicts may indicate a reservation in our program. And that was one of the biggest things for me in early recovery, was changing the people, places, and things, which can be difficult, because you feel like you don't have any friends anymore and you don't have anybody to talk to. But that's where the program is really important, because it gives you new friends and it gives you people to talk to, and that's really important.
So,
Well-
Kayla, I do have a question for you. What was what evidence did you need to convince you were powerless? What was the defining issue that said, I've done enough, I've had enough?
It really, this time I was looking at 2 years probation, and I've been in and out of jail a couple times, but I was always able to get by without probation, and I knew that if I kept doing what I was doing, that I was headed to prison, and it really just woke me up, and this is not worth it.
It's I read the same. Taylor and I read that. We read that same meditation this morning, and I thought about it because I had the same problem, Kayla, as you did when I first finally got sober, back from treatment, and I was back in the same town where I had done all the damage. It did strike me that if I had any chance of being successful in recovery, I was going to need to change my zip code. I wasn't trying to run away from it, but I certainly was trying to get in a position where I could be successful, and I think that's what you talk about. So I applaud your, the courage. It takes a lot of courage to walk away from things that you like and that you're comfortable with, but it's just too easy to fall back into those traps. I think that's a great topic. We appreciate your perspective on that, and we wish you continued success. Look forward to talking to you next week when you can bring us another little bit of wisdom for people in early recovery, because it is a day at a time, isn't it?
It is, most definitely.
Well, good. Well, we appreciate you, and we hope you have a good week.
All right, y'all too.
Thanks, Kay.
Thank you.
So,
Bye-bye.
Lewis, I was as part of our service commitment, my service commitment, I spoke at the hospital last night, and it was interesting. It's always interesting when you're talking to people in detox, people in early recovery. But one of the things that I tried to come across, I really wanted to make sure I could instill with them the real effect on me was the cost of what I was doing. Because when you're doing it, you don't ever really stop to take cost. And our guest tonight, we'll get into some of the financial. I'll let you introduce our guest in just a second. But, it is full-time work. It was for me, at least in my story, it was full-time work to figure out how I was going to supply my need for alcohol and for drugs. And, I started out with plenty of resources. Towards the end, I had no resources, but the appetite, I think we said it at dinner, the disease doesn't leave anything. There's no such thing as taking 10 or 15%, moving it up to the side so that you'll have some kind of reserve. The disease just eats and eats and eats until there's nothing left.
Well, and Kayla kind of touched on this, but there it goes.
That's all right.
I told you guys. So I constantly, when I share my story, talk about the fact that no one gets help, or no one walks down this path without consequences. And in your case, it was running out of options. And in my case, it was pretty much running out of options. So the cost, it can be relative. It could be financial, and it could be relationships.
Yeah.
It could be physical.
Yeah, health, no question
Health,
about
the whole
that.
deal. but the cost factor from a financial standpoint can be devastating to individuals and to families too.
Yeah, and it's not one of those things. We had dinner with our guest, and we were talking about one of the things that I didn't get in treatment. One of the things I didn't get in treatment was we never really got into a conversation about cost. We were too busy trying to cover all the basic first steps of getting into recovery. Trying to figure out how I ended up in the treatment center. I was, a financial conversation is if you're going to be successful in recovery, you're definitely going to have some kind of financial help, some kind of financial planning, because this, when you're starting over, you're starting over. And a lot of us, I know a lot of us, we spend a lot of the time going through our resources, not keeping up with how much it was costing us, certainly not considering what treatment was going to cost us. And so those are all parts of this disease that really don't get discussed very often.
Well, so much of this is done under the guise of triage, because you're in a crisis situation, and you really don't. You have the time to react and not to act. If you had the chance to actually plan this out, you would probably do a whole lot differently than you do.
Well, it's funny. You make decisions full of emotion when you're going through what we go through, and the best financial decisions, usually you should be devoid of emotion. I mean, it's you do some analysis and you make good decisions. When you're still addicted, or and this didn't happen to me, but it certainly happened to my family. As you're trying to figure out how to stop everything, the emotion is thick. But you're burning money. I mean, everything costs. Everything that we do costs, especially in treatment. So I think that's a good lead into our guest tonight. Why don't you introduce our listeners to our guest tonight?
So I have brought on a gentleman who has become a friend. We started out, what did you say, Michael, about a little over a year ago?
About a year ago.
About a year ago. Michael kind of showed up at my doorstep like a lost puppy, and we have we've struck up a friendship, an unlikely one, I believe, but it's one that I think will last the test of time. And Michael, I'm going to kind of turn this over to you at this point. I could serve up your bio, but I think you would do a whole lot better job of kind of giving folks an idea of your background and then how you kind of got down this path.
Sure.
By the way, this is Michael Lewis. Okay.
Michael Lewis, yes, thank you.
Very welcome.
Thank you. So my wife and I moved down here in 2016, and we came down here full-time 2019, originally with an eye towards retirement, but retirement didn't stick well, and it was a question of what did I want to do. And I thought a lot about it, and one of the things we talked about over dinner is people who work in the recovery community, most of them don't choose it. It kind of chooses you. For me, I came to the conclusion that our story, and we'll go into the details shortly, but our story with our son and what we went through, tested me as an individual, tested me as a husband, tested me as a father. And to say that, I knew what I was doing when this journey started would be a huge mistake. We talk about the emotional aspects. You're making decisions at a time you shouldn't be making any. When we first discovered the problem, I remember how it first started. We were attending family therapy. We had just had another session. We came back home. Our son was very belligerent. He's very angry. He stormed out of the house. I chased after him. He threw his phone at me, and he went off. Went back inside, and the phone rang, and it was the therapist said, you have to come back in. And I looked at my wife, and I said, well, what do you think happened? I don't understand. Maybe we lost our keys or something. And it was not 5 minutes. It was a 40-minute drive. We drove there pretty much in stunned silence because we didn't know what to expect. And he came in and he basically told us that we were going to have a problem And if we didn't deal with it and deal with it soon, it was going to escalate beyond anything that we could imagine. But yeah, we got no details. And maybe this is kind of a sign of the times. I mean, we're talking here in the, I guess it's the early 90s. And, you know, we went home and it was like, okay, you know, what are we dealing with? What's going on? We know we have problems. We didn't quite connect it to an addiction issue. But you know, as soon as it's happened, as soon as things started to reveal itself, we went into a state of panic. And at that point, you're willing to pay anybody anything if you'll only get your kid back. And you work under the assumption that things will be normal if you just pay enough money and you just wait long enough and life will resume the way it was. And, you know, here I am now, I guess about 17 years later, and I'm here to tell you that it doesn't work that way. Addiction is a family problem. It is not unique to an individual. We're often told that, you know, as parents, what is it they say? You didn't cause it, you can't cure it. What's the other one there, Lewis?
I knew you were going to call me on that.
You're the expert.
Yes. Well, I'll figure it
Well,
out.
we'll figure it out. We'll
Yes.
get to it. But the point being is, as parents, and this was kind of like our early testing of our relationship, because I do remember very early on, I looked at my wife and I said, regardless of what happens, it's not your fault. You know, we didn't do anything to cause this. And as we go through the process, you know, our son was very good at manipulating us. He was very keen on pointing out that, you know, my wife, that was the cause of a lot of the problems. And, you know, he would drive a wedge through us. And I will say that, you know, we stuck together through this. I've seen other families that kind of degenerated, you know, as typically one person is kind of classified as the enabler, the other person is kind of the top person. Didn't cause it, can't cure it, and can't control it. There you are, the three C's. You
Yeah.
could have chimed in, Lewis. You didn't have to pass that to me.
No, I wanted to give you
Trying to
credit.
make me sound smarter than I am. But, you know, when I decided to come down here, I felt that I wanted to help people. We went through a long journey. We recognized that, you know, finances are kind of the elephant in the room. No one ever wants to talk about it. I think people generally become very much afraid that if you bring up finances, you're either going to trigger something like, oh my God, I can't believe I've done this to you. I didn't realize how much it cost. Some people get, you know, really angry, like, are you putting a dollar figure on my life? So generally speaking, what ends up happening is you avoid the conversation of finances. And as I started thinking about the kind of practice I wanted to run and how I wanted to help, early on I met Lewis and I was telling him, you know, I was involved and I was offering up lectures. I would go to various institutions and teach on financial awareness. And you had mentioned that the conversation never comes up about money, and I will tell you, I made it a point to bring it up. I was teaching a class to a group of people in Florida, and you usually get a pretty interesting mix. Some people are really interested in what you say, but there's usually one or two people that are just incredibly belligerent. They just don't believe what anybody says. And we were starting to talk about money, and you know, this one particular person was saying, oh, you know what, it doesn't matter. My parents are going to let me die. And I kind of looked at the room and I said, let me ask people a question here. How many of you in the room are paying for this on your own? And not one person raised their hand. I said, okay, how many people in the room are having their treatment paid for by their parents? Pretty much everybody, you know, raises their hand. And I said, how many people of you just hate your parents so much that, you know, you kind of wish that they were never born and you never had anything to do with them? And a couple of people would raise their hand. I said, so let me ask you a question. I go, do you have any idea how much your parents are paying for this. They go, nah, it doesn't matter. I go, would it surprise you that they were paying somewhere around 50 to 60,000 for this? And they would look at me like in shock. And I said, do you have a problem with that number? I said, no, I just never realized that treatment was so expensive. I go, by the way, we're only talking about this treatment. How many of you, is this the first place you've ever been to? And, you know, now guys are starting to think about what this all means. You know, I said, oh, I've been to 2 or 3 places. I said, so answer me this. You hate your parents. They're paying for treatment. Why do you think they're even paying for the treatment? And they, at this point, they just don't have an answer. I said, I'll give you the answer. I said, the answer is they're paying for this treatment because they believe in you, and they believe that you're going to get well, and they have hope. And for everyone in this room who hates their parents, I would suggest to you that you need to, next time you see them, you need to give them a big hug and tell them how much you love them, because they clearly love you. You may not see it right now. I go, but they could have all turned their backs on you if they chose to, and they didn't. And you have no idea whether they can afford this or not, but they haven't even given it a second thought. And to me, you know, you read a lot of articles about the implications of finance on addiction, but they always talk about what does it do to the addict. You had mentioned how it spent everything that you had, but what none of these articles talk about is what does it do to the families who, or the benefactors who are paying for it.
Right.
The assumption being, oh, they've got endless money, so it doesn't really count. Well, the bottom line is that if you consider all the costs of treatment, and it is not just going to a residential place. It is the airline tickets that you pay to go across country. It's paying somebody to handcuff your child and drive them, from Virginia to Seattle. It's you staying in hotels. It's you paying for his therapy. It's you paying for his medications. It's you paying for your own therapy and your own medications. And then all the enabled money that goes along with it, paying his rent, paying his phone bills, paying his cable bills, giving him fund money to try to have some sense of normalcy, buying him a car, buying the insurance on the car. The numbers, end up costing not tens of thousands, but hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I reluctantly, reluctance is not the right word, probably a little bit too late, realized that a lot of the decisions that we made as a family were made in such the heat of the moment that there was no hope that we would ever make a rational decision with respect to money, and there was no hope that we would ever be able to figure out whether or not we were getting value for the services that we were paying for. And so when I decided to build my practice, I realized that I wanted to help families that were going through this. I recognized that they are in a highly emotional state, and if we can get to them soon enough to work with them and basically say, look, you have a long road ahead of you. This is just step one. You need to focus all your energies on helping your loved one get better. You need to focus your energies on helping your family heal, and let me take care of the financial aspects of it, kind of just remove that burden from them. I thought that was a reason to basically build my practice, and that's what I've dedicated myself to.
So, Michael, just kind of back up a second.
Sure.
If you would, just touch on your background. What would qualify you to be able to serve that up?
Okay. So I spent the last 31 years on Wall Street working for large international financial institutions. I've led large teams of programmers building risk management tools. I ran money. I started a financial advisory practice in Canada. I was the fixed income portfolio manager, and in the first 2 years of business, I was able to bring in, manage $1 billion Canadian in assets, and created a top performing fund. I had spent a lot of time working with research analysts and portfolio managers. I have a CFA, which is a very challenging 3-year minimum degree. It's self-taught. Pretty much anybody who wants to become a portfolio manager or analyst has to get one. But I learned Wall Street from the inside. I've learned the products, how they work, the managers, how they work. And one of the things that I felt for, the average individual, and it's interesting, and it's going to digress a little bit, but, as I do work for people in recovery, one of the things that I've learned is that, a lot of times we talk to people in recovery different. Our tone is different. Our content is different. The beautiful thing about finance is, in the end, it's a completely passionless set of numbers, and you can talk to people in recovery exactly the same way as you would talk to the most affluent of people. Even affluent people don't necessarily understand complex theories, structures, and I guess one of my gifts is that I was told once by one of my bosses is that I make the complex understandable. But when you talk to someone in recovery and you're talking to them about budgets and you're talking to them about mutual funds and you're trying to explain to them what retirement are, and you talk to them like you would anybody else, I find that they react very favorably to it. They don't feel like they're being babied. They don't feel like they're being talked down to. They feel like they're engaging in a conversation. I had one class that I gave, and at the end I thought I would give out an evaluation. Not surprising, one person out of the 14 were in there gave me a 1, but everybody else gave me 9s and 10s. They said they really liked the information. A lot of them are not exposed to it. When I talk about budgeting as an example, and I've seen how some places teach budgeting. They say, here's $100, how would you spend it? And, they look to see whether or not you allocate a certain money to gas and rent and all that other good stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, that's not really, what a budget really is. I mean, a budget is much more than that. But more importantly, and I learned this from trying to teach my son budgeting. The first time I did it, I went through a very similar process. I said, put down how much money you have and where you spend it. And he went through the exercise. And at the end, he goes, well, Dad, thanks a lot. You basically proved that I'm screwed. And I got no way out. I got no money, and I got all these expenses. And he felt, horrible about it. And I thought about it, and I go, if I was talking to anybody else, I would have emphasized the fact that a budget isn't, the end-all and be-all. It's really, it's a photograph. It's a point in time. But what was missing from the whole conversation about budget is goals and objectives and desires and dreams, and all that stuff is incredibly powerful. When I talk to clients in my practice, I mean, the first thing we do is we talk about what are you trying to accomplish. Do you want to buy a new house? Do you want to spoil your grandchildren? Whatever it happens to be. But those dreams are incredibly powerful, and when you start thinking about those things and they become real to you, they become meaningful. And I'd like to share one story of somebody that I talked to in a facility in Pennsylvania. We were talking about budgeting, and he raises his hand and he asked the question, well, what do you do about somebody like me? And I go, well, what is somebody like you? What's the issue? And he goes, I'm very impulsive. Is anybody here surprised to hear somebody in recovery is impulsive?
That's news to me.
That's right. It's shocking.
Yes.
I go, give me an example. What do you mean you're impulsive? He goes, well, I was driving down the road and I saw the side for the new Mercedes, and I had to have one. And the very next day I went into the store and I bought the new Mercedes. He goes, and now I'm being evicted from my house and I don't know what to do. And I said, let me ask you a question. When you spent the money on the Mercedes, did you stop to think that the amount of money you were spending on the car could have put your kids through college? He goes, no. I said, did you ever stop for a minute to think that the amount of money you spent on the car could have put a down payment on a nicer place for yourself and you could have put your kids in a better school system? He goes, no. And he started to cry. And I said, listen, I'm not doing this to point out or make you feel bad. I said, the reality of it is people who are in recovery, they're so focused on the immediacy of today. I mean, let's face it, everybody tells you just take one day at a time, right? One day at a time. It's all about just get through the day. Well, finances don't work that way. Finances need time to work. And when you start thinking about the long-term aspects. And what I saw even in him as we went through this is that when he started factoring in long-term goals, all of a sudden he realized that there's a good chance he was going to live a lot longer than he really realized, but he'd never thought about it. Therefore, he never planned for it. And since he's never stopped to think about, you know, I might actually have children. I might want to put them through college. I might want a better life. Immediacy will always win when there's nothing on the other side to compete for it. So if you have $1 and you're sitting there going, I can either spend $1 or $10 on a pack of cigarettes or drink, and there's nothing on the other side, which is, if I put that $10 away, I might be able to put a down payment on a vacation that I'd really like to take my wife to, then immediacy will always win. You'll always spend everything you have, and it'll always be gone. The minute you introduce these hopes and dreams, then all of a sudden there's competing forces, and that competing forces is incredibly healthy because it makes you evaluate and prioritize what's important to you. And I've found in dealing with people in addiction that they've never had any hope because they've never thought beyond just getting through today. But the minute you start having discussions about what life is going to look like in the future, all of a sudden they feel better about the fact too. And my son, after we redid the discussion about budgeting, he has come to realize that maybe I should be saving for something, that there is something beyond just survival, and I think it's a powerful motivator.
Michael, let's just further that discussion. We actually have a special guest on the other line. Special guest, would you please announce yourself?
Hey, this is Zach Lewis.
Hello, Zach.
Michael's son.
I just want to defend you for a second, Zach.
The one who he showed me how financially screwed I was at one point in my life. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I just want to defend you for a second here, because he mentioned the manipulation part of it, and I got to tell you,
Yes.
you could not have been as good a manipulator as I was. I'm sorry. I had 38 years of drugging and drinking, and I was a master manipulator. So you can take second chair to me if you'd like.
That is just fine with me. I'm okay. It's a
Okay.
privilege to take second place. Yeah.
It's a close second, by the way.
Don't listen to him. Hey, listen, I would like to ask you, Zach, from your perspective, and you and I and Macon kind of share a commonality here because the three of us are in varying degrees of recovery. And you're the youngest of the three of us by a long shot. How did you, what was the final nail in the coffin for you that finally clicked?
Oof. I think the final. I kind of remember what that experience was, and I had just lost another job, and I got pseudo evicted from the apartment I was living in with a roommate. So I had nowhere to go other than my car, and I had to move into. I had this little powder blue Subaru Impreza. It's not very big, and I had no back window because it had broken. So I kind of kept a trash bag on it every so often. And I had to live in this thing for a couple days. I tried to sort out what I was going to do. And one of the mornings I woke up and, there's bugs in the thing. And there's, I had a dog at the time named Buddy. And I really couldn't care for Buddy anymore. And I woke up in the back seat. And I kind of dusted myself off. And for the first time, I looked in the rearview mirror as I, got ready to go get breakfast from McDonald's. And I saw myself, and it was the first time I realistically said, holy crap, I'm a loser. Like, I'm truly, truly a loser. And it was in that moment, I called, a family friend / cousin of mine, who I said, listen, I said, Matt, I'm in trouble, man. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I mean, I'd been through, my dad had mentioned, the severity of the financial burden I put on them. So let's put it this way. I had not just been through one program. We're talking about many. Wilderness, residential, the whole 9 yards. And I said, I don't know what to do, man. I'm out of options. I don't even want to die. I just want to be I just want it to stop. I can't stop doing drugs. I can't stop drinking. I'm living in my car. I have no hope. It's like, I've tried committing suicide before and I failed at that. Like, I just don't know what to do. I don't know where else to turn. And if someone can give me a direction to, a better way of going about things, I'll do it. And I believe I can say this. And if I can't, you guys can just point it out to me or what have you. But he basically said, there's a clubhouse that does a lot of meetings. He said they have one at 5:30. Go there and raise your hand and just say you need help. I said, what am I going to do? I'm going to go to this place and be a whole bunch of random people. And I'm going to raise my hand and someone's going, what do they care? Who are they? They don't care about me. He said, you asked me what to do. I'm telling you what to do. You can either do it or don't. It's your call. And I said, okay, fine. So I went out. I got to that meeting. I sat right by the door so that I could bolt out of there as soon as I got uncomfortable. And at the beginning of these, fellowship meetings, they say, listen, if there's anyone in danger, raise your hand. And something compulsively in me just kind of raised and said, I can't do this anymore. I don't feel like sharing, but if there's anyone willing to talk to me, I'll talk after. And let me know if I'm going too far off base.
No,
this is great.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when I was in the room, they do that. I went out to go, halfway through, I just went to go to the bathroom. And these two guys followed me out in the bathroom, and I was kind of, look creeped out. What the hell are you guys doing in there? I'm just trying to go to the bathroom. They're like, listen, we just want to make sure you don't leave and that you're okay. I said, okay. I'm fine. I'm coming back in. I appreciate it. And after the meeting, I went outside, and at the time I smoked, just like about everybody else who's involved in the program. And, one of the guys came up to me, said, how you doing? I said, I've been better. So what's going on? I said, I'm doing this. Right now I'm having to temporarily live in my car. I got a lot going on. I got a dog. He goes, all right, are you ready? Are you ready to be done? I'm like, yeah, man, I'm ready to be done. He goes, great. You got to move into a halfway house. Oh, but I can't move into a halfway house. I got this going on. I got a dog. I don't go with the dog. I got this. He goes, listen, I'm not going to cuss, but he was very straightforward. Like, I don't care about your excuses. I had to divorce my wife. I had to move out of the state. I had to all these things that were far more intense than my situation. He said, because that's what it took for me to do this. If you're willing to do whatever it takes, then you'll do it. If you're not, then you can go back to whatever you're doing. And it really stunned me. It was like the first time anyone had just flat out, they didn't coddle me. There was no, listen, man, it's going to be okay. You're going to figure it out. We're all going to, we're going to be all right. And there was none of that. It was very much brass tacks. Either stay in the situation you're in, you're miserable, you'll probably die, or you could do something else and find a new way of life. Very simple. And I don't care which one you choose, because I'll be okay. That was like in their head, you learn that way. It's not going to change his life at all, whichever way I chose to go. Yeah. And in that moment, you can kind of tell that I was, obviously now taking it very seriously. And he goes, listen, if you're really serious about it, there's an old man standing right there in the middle of the road. Go up to him and tell him you want help, and he'll help you. It's okay. All right. So, being the selfish and self-interested person that I was, he's in the middle of a conversation with 3 other people, this good old boy from Texas, and I just interrupt the entire conversation. Say, excuse me, sir, that man told me if I want to get help, you're the guy to talk to. And he's like, that's great. Do you hear me having a conversation? I said, well, yeah. He's like, okay, so why don't you sit tight? Stood there and finished the conversation. I said, I need your help. Will you be my sponsor? And he said, no. I was like, well, what the hell, man? This guy's over here telling me to come talk to you. Everybody's supposed to be selfless. I ask you for help. You tell me no. He says, it doesn't work that way. He says, meet me here every day at 5 o'clock. We'll talk. We'll get to know each other. If it works out, then we'll proceed and we'll have a relationship. But you're here at 5 o'clock. Don't be late. And there was something in the way he spoke to me. He then gave me a set of rules, very simple set of rules. He said, one, you're going to call me every day because I want to hear your voice, so I know you're okay. You can hear in another person's voice they're having a tough day or if everything's all right. The two, you're going to give this thing, that these set of principles and these set of guidelines that suggestions that I'm going to give you, you're going to do it so well, you're going to try so hard to prove me wrong that it won't work for the next 90 days. After 90 days, if you don't feel any better, I'll buy you steak dinner, we'll go our separate ways, no problem. And I said, okay. That's a reasonable request. He said, and number 3 is the hardest one for people, but I want you to know that if you're going through something and you don't believe, just believe that I believe. And that stuck with me forever. If you don't believe, believe that I believe. And be it whether it was believe in God, be it whether it's believe in yourself, just believe that I believe. I asked this man for guidance. I asked this man for support because I looked in his eyes and I saw that he had something I wanted. And so he basically said, put your own thoughts aside and know that whenever you're in question, know that I believe and just believe that I do. And that hit me pretty hard. And so I showed up every day, 5 o'clock. And the next day he got me into a halfway house. I got my dog adopted out to a wonderful caretaker. And I began the journey that has, by the grace of God, kept me sober for the last 4 years.
Zach, do you believe that? By the way, how old were you when you finally succumbed?
I'm 31 now, so roughly 27.
Okay. Do you think?
Yeah, November 1st. Uh-huh.
So, do you think that had you not gone through what you went through prior to this would have stuck, or did it take this particular moment in time to force your hand?
It's a great question. I think everything is, nothing is on our timeline. You could argue, and I've heard the argument, and you hear lots of people have it, especially when parents and their children or people about their friends. I say, come on, man, look at what you've done. Isn't that enough? Aren't you done yet? You could look back at my life. I had a very promising hockey career at one point. The one story my dad always tells, one of his prouder moments of it, is when I made a team I didn't belong on. And I, worked as hard as I could, and I ended up going from basically someone that gave a jersey to be on the team to being a starter. And I had a lot of promise to go and play college and these things. And I chose to be around different people and get involved in different things. And I ruined it. Someone could say, hey, man, isn't that enough? 17 at the time, isn't that enough? Like, don't you realize you have a problem? Maybe you should stop. Then I had, a prestigious career on Wall Street. I was doing, certain work in a very sexy space. And, I overdosed on speed and wrote a letter to the entire company, basically, just totally humiliating myself and forcing me to have to leave the business. And you would assume someone else would say from the outside, isn't that enough? What more evidence do you need to see? Haven't you been through enough? Aren't you ready to quit? And it still wasn't. For whatever reason, the insanity is what the insanity is. And I guess I was able to justify that I could do things differently the next go-around until something finally clicked where it was just like, man, this is not going to change. And it's a hard question. I would just say that, yes, this was my experience personally required me to lose everything multiple times and smash my head into a wall repeatedly before finally getting it. Sometimes it's really cool to see some people come in who are a little bit younger and haven't been through quite as much, that they come to a realization. They have, there's different bottoms, right? Some people just, your bottom is just when you stop shoveling. And some people chose to stop shoveling years ago, and so they didn't have to go quite through as much, demoralization. But we all have our own journey, and it just takes what it takes before you wake up. And the truth of the matter is some people don't ever. And they take it all the way to the grave, So it's a hard question to answer. For me, yes, but I think it's kind of circumstantial.
Zach, this is Macon. First off, thanks for calling or for being on the show tonight and being so honest with us. We got your dad in here, and the conversation tonight's really been more about finances. One of the questions I would have is, did you ever consider the cost, not just what it cost you, but what it cost your family? Because, for me personally, I never did when I was going through it. I've always been interested in some people. I mean, we just become so selfish. I was just wondering what was your experience?
I never had a clue. I never thought of it, even in the slightest. In fact, it was crazy when I was listening to, my dad kind of speak about his experience with me and some of the stuff he's done. And he mentioned, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right.
Holy mother. That's quite a bit of money.
Yeah.
And so even now, even though I've been in the world and I know what it costs, I think there's a part of me that's never really wanted to put the story totally together in terms of what it really goes for. One of the, and at that moment, I think in treatment, you take it for granted you're just at this place. And no one ever looks at you and goes like, because they also don't want you to know what you're paying to be there. Some people take it in an entirely different way. Some people take it as entitlement and say, I know what my parents pay here, so I want a cigarette break whenever I want a cigarette break.
Yeah.
But there's also the aspect where, someone, if they tell you how much, they feel like it does themselves, a business service. But I think the truth of the matter is, like, if I were to look at myself right now, and one of the biggest things that's helped that a few people showed me, and including my dad, is, listen, I got a terrible, I don't really have many vices left, right? So if I go through, like, a tough situation, we all turn to different things. I turn to food. That's for me at the moment. And, my dad kind of touched on the same thing. And someone once pointed out to me, when I go and eat out, they're like, if you just spend $10 on a meal, it's like, yeah. And he's like, okay, well, you're doing that like 5 days a week. That's like
Right.
$50 a week, right? Times 4, times 12. Like, holy crap, that's a lot of money. Now, back into that in terms of how many hours you had to work to pay for that food. All these different things. When you put this, you don't leave it up to chance. Here is what it costs. Here's the truth of the matter. It has an impact. I can imagine the look on people's faces when he was at that class, and do any of you have any idea how much your family's paying for you to be here? And finding out, like, yeah, dude, that's probably for most of you and any new employee, that's like your salary for the first year before tax. So you wouldn't, your entire first year as a new employee at coming out of college was paid in cash to this company for you to be there. And I can imagine the look on your face kind of dropping, because you take it for granted when it doesn't come out of your pocket. I mean, I'll tell you, if I can share one quick story in terms of helping with that realization, some of what these lessons look like. When I was in that car, my dad and my uncle, who's I think he was there too, he's listening. There was a day I went and I met with him, and I met with my cousin. We went for lunch, and after lunch, my dad picked up the tab, and I said, "Listen, I'm in this situation." At that time, I had in my bank account. I remember looking at my checking and savings. It was like 36 cents and 87 cents or something like that. And I was going to have to transfer the savings into checking so that I could buy some popcorn or ramen or something along those lines. And I was like, "Listen, Pop, can you just throw me $20, so I can pay for some food?" And he looked at me and he just said, "I can't do this anymore with you." He goes, "Listen, I love you. You're a smart kid. You'll figure it out." And I threw just a total childish temper tantrum, tossing them out, doing all these things, look at what you did. You can't even help your homeless kid feed himself, blah, 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 blah. it ended up being one of the best things to ever happen because all of a sudden everything else stops being taken for granted. You know, you become more aware of there is no fallback, there is no pillow. If I run out of money, I'm out of money.
Yeah.
You can't call the man and be like, listen, I'm out. And so all of a sudden you recognize when you go to the grocery store and these non-perishable items that go bad in your fridge quickly just cost you $30 and you better eat it or you've lost that money. All these things are taken for granted the whole time, and you've now you forced me into that experience, and you're adding a number that you're feeling that gives you a totally different insight into and perspective into the financial component of just life in general, let alone the substantial number that goes into paying for the whole journey.
Yeah, I don't know when we go from being in early recovery to actually start paying attention. You know, we're talking to your dad at dinner. We had a long conversation about, well, you work with parents, you work with addicts. You know, the conversation, I don't care if you're in early recovery, if you're in active addiction, as your dad points out, the pluses and the minuses never change. I mean, it costs what it costs. It's just a matter of when you become aware. You know, it's funny, people in recovery, we become aware of our problem and we fix it. One of the things I told your dad when I was in treatment, we never, finances, now I'm sure that there was a conversation on the walk-in from the controller or whoever, making sure that we, whoever was taking care of my treatment was there to make the payment. But it is it's a big part of extended recovery, because I know at some point, as you say, you become aware that it's going to cost. Every day it's going to cost something, and you go back. It's almost like you start over again, as your dad said, and you have to go through some basic training, which is a difficult thing for people in early recovery.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely. I mean, if you look at you can go back through your experience to treatment too, and you can look at. I went to one program where they give you an allowance every week that you would go for grocery shopping and stuff, and the stuff that people would spend on was just like absurd, right? And the reality of it is, the first step is admitting you have a problem. Well, first you have to know you have a problem. Let's start there. There's a total lack of education and information related to financial planning, and I'm not even talking about any of the complex stuff. I mean, there are people who go through treatment who've never opened a bank account before.
That's right.
They've been running and gunning. They know Western Union real well, but they don't know about walking into the bank and opening up a basic account. They don't know about getting a debit card. They don't know about setting up auto insurance. They don't know any of this stuff. They don't know none of it. And so you're kind of, having that sort of basic, basic understanding, basic, comprehension of these things, it starts to make you, see yourself, I think, in early recovery and as you go through the time, it helps you become an adult and helps you see yourself as no longer being this, like, kid in recovery, but that you're a responsible, sober adult. So it's crucial,
As you're talking, Zach, and thinking about Macon's situation too, more and more I think about it, I feel like a sucker. I actually paid for my own treatment. I was my own benefactor.
Yeah. Lewis, I'd have paid for mine too, but I'd used all of it.
Well, exactly. Unfortunately, I had money in the bank.
Yeah, bank.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the few.
Yes. Well, it's kind of funny too. I was talking to somebody the other day, and as you both you guys know, one of the steps is you make a list of all the people you've harmed, and you then make amends to them all.
Oh yeah.
Well, I made a list, and on my list, I owed money to no one, and my sponsor called me a liar.
Yeah.
And I said, no, I didn't go quite down that path.
Yeah. It's crazy. Well, Zach, I want to thank you so much for calling. The hour goes by so fast when we do this show, and I want to give your dad the last couple minutes here so he can we can ask him a question or two. But we want to thank you for sharing. It's very powerful, and we're proud of you. I know your dad's proud of you. We're glad that you're in the position you're in, and we wish you the best of luck.
Yes.
Yeah, listen, grateful for the opportunity. It's a pleasure to be of service. Dad, I love you very
Love you
much.
too, Zach.
You're doing a hell of a job.
Thanks.
All right?
Thanks, Zach.
Bye. Thank you.
So,
Wow.
you want to know why I do what I do? It's
Yeah.
because of what you just heard. I will tell you, there were times where I didn't think we were going to end up where we are now. And I believe that most people who go through recovery don't relapse because they feel that need to do the drugs. I think they relapse because they feel they either lost hope, don't have a way out, and are just fearful. And if you can provide, as a support group, give them the hope and give them the tools to cope with financial triggers. What did someone once tell me? The two biggest reasons for relapse are finance and romance. I can't help the romance part, but the finance is such a major trigger for people that it's not that they are desirous of taking the drugs, but because they can't cope with the financial
Yeah,
situation.
absolutely.
And we can help them eliminate that trigger. I think as a community, we should see a much bigger
Success rate.
success rate.
Well-
And that's why I'm doing what I do.
Well, Michael, when you and I first met, I'll be honest with you, I did not understand what you're trying to accomplish. Over the last year, I've been able to not only understand what you're trying to accomplish, but appreciate the fact that that conversation in the world in which I think both Macon and I live isn't being had. Is that correct English?
I think that's correct.
Is not being had simply because it usually takes a back seat to the more critical trauma part of the addiction component.
Yeah,
It's the triage component.
the heavy lifting.
Yeah,
Right, the heavy
but
lifting.
I think it needs to be at least a part of the conversation up front.
I do too, Lewis. And one of the questions I wrote down, and we'll definitely let Michael give out his web address if people can reach out to him if they want to talk to him. Is I wonder what role, and I've never seen a study, but I'm sure there is when there's a study for everything. I wonder what role in relapse finance plays. I mean, I wonder how many people go back to the bottle or to the drug only because they can't make it. And I'm going to tell you something. There is a sense of panic. I know a sense of panic when you realize that your expenses exceed your resources. And what I always did when that happened is I just drank and it went away. Now, the deficit didn't go away, but my thinking about it certainly went away. And so I wonder, in today, as relapse, I mean, let's face it, it's 50-50 if you're going to make it for most people. I wonder what role finance, but it's definitely something we should look at. And Michael, why don't you give everybody your web address so if they want to reach out to you, they can do that.
Sure. If you'd like to talk to me, you can go to my website, which is www.tutorfinancial.com. Tutor as in teacher. I believe education is a fundamental component to not only financial planning, but just recovery in general. And if you would like to call me, you can use 919-629-0178. You should all know that you're not alone out there. There are people like everybody in this room who just wants to help. We're all just a phone call away.
Yep.
And don't be afraid to pick up the phone.
Thanks, Michael. And Lewis, next week, I don't know who we're going to have on, but it'll be riveting as usual.
Yes.
Michael, we really do appreciate your expertise. And, this is one of those things where we'll probably come back to you time and time again when we have specific financial questions, because the financial part of recovery is always going to be there. So we want to thank everybody. Lewis, I'll see you next week.
You definitely will.
And thanks everybody for listening tonight.
Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to The Recovery Boys on WFJA. Visit the Recovery Boys website at therecoveryboys.com. We thank you for listening to the Recovery Boys.